Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you are listening to this live post-match Pubcast. It's me, Suburban Gooner Chris. Thank you very much for joining us. All of those people who are joining us on a warm summer, or feels like summery Sunday afternoon, as Arsenal have just finished their game against Fulham, which finished 1-1. And joining me in the virtual pub is Paul, Mr. Invincible. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm very, no, I don't know what I am. He has a big
First and
chin.
foremost, formalities. What are you drinking? What drink is it?
It's a Tanqueray Sevilla, like an orange flavored gin in a big bowl with a huge round glob of ice, and it's my third today.
Very nice. I have got myself a Kronenberg. What has AFC Charlie got himself today? Charlie, what are you drinking?
Nice, simple bottle of Peroni.
Lovely. Nice, simple bottle of Peroni. To drown the sorrows that was that 1-1 draw that we've just witnessed against Fulham, because, lads, as I was saying to you just as we were off air a second ago, I'm finding it really difficult to get too emotional about this game because, frankly, this season is done. And it felt like that to me today. It genuinely felt like we couldn't be asked. I couldn't be asked as a spectator watching that on TV. And it looked like the Arsenal players could not be asked against a Fulham team that we'll hit with some numbers before we do the hot take. A Fulham team that have never beaten Arsenal at the Emirates or at home. Literally, they've had like 30 attempts. They've never beaten us. Well, they've never won a North London. Sorry, not North London. They've not won a London derby in something like 22 or 23 matches. This was all set up to be, and also they're in terrible form. This should have been an absolute walk in the park from Arsenal. And after the first few seconds, it felt like it. But my hot take, I guess, from that game is that I don't think those Arsenal players could be asked today. Charlie, what's your sort of hot take?
My hot take from it is that it's just disappointing that, as you've just mentioned there, Chris, Arteta is clearly throwing all his eggs into the Europa League basket. Today there is an opportunity to go 2 points behind Tottenham and try and get a little catch them. Good end to the season. And that starting lineup is my hot take. I think it's disgraceful, to be honest with you. I'd like to see the stats. Have we ever won a game with Ceballos and El Neni centre midfield? Hector Bellerin hasn't been seen for weeks, and he's starting. And I do not see the need. Why do we keep changing our centre-back partnerships? No other team fucking does it. Why do we? That is my hot take. Arteta's team selections, I think, today was very, very... It's just frustrating. He's put all his eggs into that Europa League basket. And unfortunately, mate, I mean, I'll normally stick behind Arteta, but I just think with all these eggs into the Europa League basket, all of a sudden we don't win the Europa League and we finish 10th, he's going to... I don't think he will go. I don't think the ball will sack him. But he is going to have people calling for his blood for the first game of the season.
Yeah, it's... Do you know, that lineup, just touching on that before we go to Paul's hot take, Charlie, that lineup, I was kind of okay with it before the game, except that midfield duo. I just don't understand. Like, Partey's missed a lot of the season. So there's an argument for him playing at least get Partey in there alongside a Ceballos. Because Mohamed El Neni, I mean, there was one particular moment in the first half when Smith Rowe made a really good run in behind the left back and the centre half. And all El Neni's got to do is just slot a 15-yard pass straight in front of him. And he's looking, his body shape, his face, he's facing it. And he goes backwards to Holding. And that just sums him up. I mean, the sooner we get away from the likes of El Neni, the better for me, because it was just painful watching those two. But Paul, just give us a hot take then from your perspective.
Yeah, I think I'd just amplify what Charlie said, which is about the tinkering with the formation. I mean, with the lineup. I thought that Holding and Murray had been so solid. I think Chambers had been fine. I can't see that those guys were in any kind of pink zone or orange zone or any kind of zone. They're defenders. I'm sure they could play, 38 games, on the trot without being injured. Yeah. And I just don't know why he changed that, because if you've got something working and you want momentum, we talked about it in the last pod that we're in the meaty end of the season Lacquer was scoring. We looked solid. We scored more goals. We weren't conceding that many. That's what you want going into your last 7 games. There's a chance you could get 21 points, maybe push for 5th or 4th place. I mean, if everyone else implodes like they have, this was a real, this still is an opportunity in the league with the way results are going for us to maybe scrounge something out of the season. And I think Charlie got it completely right there. I think that Arteta just tinkered too much, and it cost us because there was no fluidity in this game compared to the last couple.
Yeah, it was really poor, and he talked about momentum before the game, but his decision making in some of the tactical playing choices for him to start, that doesn't strike momentum to me. That doesn't feel like momentum. I've got to say as well, a shout out to just a few people that are listening into us. So Trevor, another chance to gain points on the table thrown away. Trevor, you're absolutely right. And it feels like with Arsenal, it's 2 steps forwards, 1 step back in the league every time. We've had so many chances this season where we thought, oh, hang on, we get a win here, and we could suddenly start looking up the table. And once again, we put in insipid performances. I've got to talk about individuals as well, though, because it really makes me sad to say this, Charlie, but Hector Bellerin is not the player that he was. I thought he was poor today. He gave the ball away a number of times. It really makes me sad because he's such a likeable person. He's been at the club for so long. He's a real ambassador at times for us. But in terms of on the pitch, his decline really sort of depresses me a bit. What's your kind of view on Hector Bellerin's performance today and him in general?
I think he's rubbish. I really do. I like him. As you said, I like him. I mean, he's been here for a long time. He's one of those who's come through the youth. You always want to see him do well. Since that injury he got against Chelsea, I know it was quite bad. And he come back, he just looks weak. He looks like a little boy when he plays out there. I think he gives the ball away. He's got no purpose. He's got no pace. I think he's rubbish. I really do. And I think Callum Chambers the last couple of weeks to be honest with you, has been a very welcome surprise. He's come in, he's been quite strong. He gets up and down the pitch well. We get good final balls in. The balls he puts in are always threats. Bellerin's just a complete opposite. And I'm sure, as you mentioned just a minute ago, Paul, and all these players like Callum Chambers, he's played 6 games this season. He could have fucking played today. There's absolutely we've not got another game until Friday night now. There is not one. That back 4 that he's kept the last 2 games, Chambers, Holding, Mari, Xhaka, 2 clean sheets, did not even look like letting a go in at all. Why change it? Because that is your base of your team. That is, we've done, granted it was only Sheffield United, and I think the other night was a great result, and we played well. We went out with a purpose. And I think that was the main difference between today and Thursday night. They looked up for it Thursday night, so they knew the importance of it. Today, they're just walking about the pitch, aren't they? I mean, it was boring, wasn't it? I mean, but I'm saying that, the chances we've had, the goal that was disallowed, their penalty, which I think we will go on to, I'm sure about, and is a complete. On another day, that is 3 or 4-0.
Yeah, but it feels like that.
But I just think with that starting line-up, you're setting yourself up to fail. Go start the team, go 2-3-0 up, then take these players off.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. So let's move on to, I guess, Paul, you just called it up there. So talk to me about your highlight of the game. We'll talk about highlight, but I do think there are some key moments that we do need to touch on as well. The offside. Talk about your highlight first, but there's the offside, there's the penalty, and then there's our goal as well. But is our goal the highlight for you of what was a pretty insipid game? You got yourself on mute, Paul.
I do. Sorry, yeah, because I have a bit of a cough, so the goal should have been a highlight, but like you said earlier before we started, it was almost kind of hard to celebrate. I mean, I celebrated Ceballos, Ceballos' goal, and which was disallowed, which I thought was, it was a great header. It was a good goal. I think at the time that it came in the game, I think it would have been very different. I think with us going 1-0 ahead. But even the goal at the end, it was just, I was already kind of done. It was such a damp squib. It was like raining on the 4th of July, and you go and watch fireworks, but there's low clouds and you can't see anything. And you go, okay, well, I heard the noises, but I didn't see any flashing lights. That's kind of what it felt like. It's hard to find a highlight, to be honest.
Yeah, do you know what? I would pick that as a highlight, not the goal itself. I would pick the movement for
Matt
the
Ryan.
disallowed goal because that was brilliant. Oh, Matt Ryan getting the flick on.
Matt Ryan,
Matt Ryan getting a flick on and a pre-assist is that,
yeah,
Charlie. So for me, I think. Go on, Charlie.
that would be my highlight. Matt Ryan coming up. That says how sad it is, really. Do you know what I mean? We had a corner just before that, and he was the one who won the corner because he was actually going in and running and big header. So he has made an impact there. And I see a stat earlier on that we've only scored 2 goals from corners this season, which is fucking ridiculous. Because
Charlie, out of 157 corners or something, I mean, it's so fucking bad.
We've got this new set piece coach in. Fuck, what do you do? Do you know what I mean? So to have Matt Ryan, the person coming up there and making things happen, is another damning issue with this football club.
Yeah, it was poor, but I tell you what, we created enough chances to win this game. So I used to play, many of you will probably know this, Championship Manager, an old school game. I think I still do it, but I used to play that on my old PC. And in Championship Manager, it was almost like the computer and its algorithm. It doesn't matter how good your team was. There's always be one game where you'd have like 37 shots on goal, and the other team would have 1 shot and 1 goal, and you'd end up losing it. And me and my brother still text each other now. Like he's a West Ham fan, and so we'll say, "Oh, Chapman game today." But that's what I'm going to do after this. I'm going to message him and say, "Chapman game today." You know, Fulham had 1 shot in the entire game, and that was a penalty, which frankly wasn't a penalty. I don't know what your take is on this, Paul, and then I'll bring Charlie in as well. But from my perspective, I looked at that 4 or 5 times. I can't see any contact. So I can't see anything. I mean, forget the fact that VAR looked at the offside, and called it onside. Fine, I'm dealing with that in the build up to that penalty. But there is no movement from Gabriel's supposed. It was silly from Gabriel to hang a leg out, to hang a toe out. Fine, I acknowledge that. But I didn't see any movement. So normally, if a player clips another player's foot, you see movement. Gabriel's foot didn't move. The only way the other player's foot moved is away from Gabriel. So I've looked at that 4 or 5 times, and what I've seen is no contact. So how on earth can VAR not look at that and say there's contact? How can they look at that and say there's contact and then give a penalty? They spent more time drawing lines on the pitch for the offside than looking at the fact that there was absolutely 0 contact from a silly challenge from Gabriel, but never a penalty in a million years, and then they stick it away. So what's your take on that, Paul?
Chris, it's am I on? Yeah, testing 1, 2. Yeah, I'm on. Chris, it's actually a sad thing that we're looking at the fact that Gabriel's, like, the tip of his shoe might have touched the tip of some other guy's shoe, and he went prancing over like some kind of leaping pony, and rolled as if he'd been shot by a sniper from Rosette. It's just sad that we're even talking about the fact that should be a penalty in football. That should be, if anything, an indirect free kick. The guy it's not a scoring opportunity. He doesn't have the ball under control. It's just that concept alone. Mike McDonald, who's been on this pod a few times, he wrote a blog where he talked about some rules that needed to be changed. And let's face it, like this game is just saturated with these prancy, divey, cheating twants, that are basically trying to con the ref all the way up the field. Whether it's Son, acting as if he had his eye gouged out, in the build-up to another goal that was disallowed last week. Or this guy, diving, and like you said, how VAR can look at that and say that that's a penalty. I mean, just the fact that even if he had touched him, it shouldn't be a penalty. I'm sorry, everything is wrong about the game right now. There's so many things that they don't make sense to me. And do I sound annoyed? Because I am.
Yeah, you are certainly annoyed. And Charlie, I want you to talk on 2 fronts here. So I want you to just talk about your thoughts on the penalty. I just add to what we've talked about there, and my little rant and Paul's little rant. But then also, can we switch over to the toenail of Saka being offside? Because once again, it feels like VAR is really, well, it hasn't shafted us in terms of the offside. If you're going to if it's offside, people will argue. But it doesn't feel like football anymore when you're basically drawing lines of the pitch and saying, this much of a player's foot is offside. It's like that part of his body and also the angle of it had no impact on the goal itself, did it? I mean,
backing into
it's pathetic.
Firstly, on the penalty, see, the referee didn't give it. So the lino who flagged, wasn't it? So the referee is 10 yards away, closer than the play. The referee said no. Then he looks over to his lino and give it. So what the problem is with the VAR stuff, looking at that, he is obviously give it after the lino waved, didn't he? So it was actually given a penalty. So with VAR, it had to be clear and obvious to overturn it. So the offside was the only chance we had of that, wasn't it? Which is ridiculous.
Okay.
So he'd already given the penalty. So it's not clear and obvious. When for us, it would be clear and obvious. But in the letter of the law, they're not going to think it's be clear and obvious. But the player bought it, and it is. I don't know what's really happened with Gabriel. I mean, he started off the season like an absolute monster, absolute rock, and it's just the last few games, he's costing us goals at the minute as well. I mean, I know that the Prague game the other week, the home leg, a Liverpool goal. So that's 3 games in a row now that he's started. He's cost us a goal. So that's
Do you know what?
quite alarming.
Do you know what I think it is? I think you're right, Charlie, because I've previously thought it's his partner, whoever his partner is, needs to be. He worked well with a certain partnership, and he was doing all right with David Luiz. But Rob Holding was all right today. I didn't really see anything wrong with Rob Holding. He's in form. So
I do know Gabriel does not speak a word of English still, and I always think he plays better next to David Luiz, maybe because of the language. So
yeah, that's what. I agree there, Charlie.
I think
Luiz and Gabriel seem to have a better relationship because they can communicate.
Yeah, so
whereas Holding and Murray, for me, they've done nothing wrong. I'm not sure what the stats are for that. I'd love to see what the central defensive pairing stats are like.
Paul, I think they got the most clean sheets. Every clean sheet.
I'm sure they have.
Holding's been in that team.
I'm sure they have.
The other day, Thursday night, I see a stat. Every clean sheet Arsenal had this season, Rob Holding's been one of the defenders. But going on to the Saka thing, I think it is. I tweeted out. I said it's not just an Arsenal thing, but I'm saying any football fan would see that and think that is absolutely disgraceful. The ball has been a lovely bit of play. The ball's come back. Saka is leaning. He's back into the defender. Okay, so he's leaning back, and his right foot is marginally offside. Granted, the toe, right? But his body is in front of the defender. It is. Can that be offside? It's fucking laughable, mate. It really is. And I'm not one of these. I'm not one of the ones who just want to go on and blame ref and feel that we're unjust, we're undone by. Because I think sometimes we have been this season, but it's a problem in football in a whole. The whole VAR is fucking terrible.
And a bit of a shout out to Dan Cullerton here, who said VAR has destroyed the beautiful game. In 30 years' time, kids won't want to play this game because of too much technology. Dan, you've probably got a point in there, hasn't he, Charlie?
In the comment, absolutely spot on. We shouldn't be talking about VAR. We should have beaten them 3-4-0 stand. He's absolutely right. He is spot on.
But Charlie, we also shouldn't be talking about it because technology in every other sport, whether it's rugby or tennis or cricket, is used properly. Nobody complains about the technology in tennis. When the linesman calls out and they go to the camera, or the guy wants to appeal it, he's given his one appeal. If it is out, he loses his appeal. That's it, in cricket, you've got all these sort of technology like we've got with Eagle Eye and stuff. They've got these Snickers. They've got the ball spin thing. They can look at it. If there's something that's too close to call, they go with the referee's decision. If it's a 50-50, whatever the referee said on field is what happens. With football, the lack of transparency and the theatrical application of technology, like they do with these thin little pixel lines that they're doing, it's all fake. They're relying on a picture that's taken at 100 frames a second is the VAR camera. Now, in 100 frames a second, somebody like Aubameyang who can run 100 meters in 10 seconds, that means that he's traveling, 10 or 12 seconds from frame to frame. People are moving in opposite directions. They need to have a gray line saying between this frame and that frame, this is what happened. And if you're anywhere inside the margin of error, it shouldn't be allowed or disallowed. You can't be a toenail off when you're 100 frames a second. There's no fucking way. Yeah. So it's just scientifically, it's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah. Do you know what I'd add to that as well, Paul? So the only way that goal ruled out today, I could moderately accept it, is if the ball that comes into Saka is at his foot and he knocks it in through that foot in the goal, then if you're talking about toenails and he's had that advantage, then fine. But let's not forget that ball then came down. It was then superb touchdown to Bellerin, and we've lamented Bellerin today, but it was a fantastic ball across from Bellerin. And Ceballos, who I also thought had a poor game, has nodded in a really good header, and all of that has been completely wiped off of the history books simply because of a terrible application of a rule that, you know, it's just stupid. It's utterly stupid. But we shouldn't be talking about. Go on, Charlie.
With that goal counts, we go and win that game pretty comfortably, I think, wouldn't you?
I mean, you look at the time that it happened. Definitely, yeah. I think.
So
you know,
so I would say that is something that has cost us. So it is worth talking about because it has cost us, I think.
Momentum. Yeah.
It is what it is, though. I mean, it's football in a whole. I see one with Liverpool the other week. They scored a goal against Villa. It was absolutely ridiculous. They got chalked off. So I do think we do waste a lot of time talking about it, which we do, and that's just all punditry and stuff. But it is a joke. It is terrible. If we lost VAR tomorrow, not one person would be disappointed.
No, I mean, I'm 100% with you there, Charlie. And Jack on Facebook has said VAR has destroyed football, but to be fair, we weren't that great. Arteta not doing subs until 70th minute, even though we were 1-0 down. I mean, he's done it again, hasn't he? Like, I tweeted that this should have been a classic at half-time. It was like, lads, we're looking sluggish today. So I tell you what, you've got 15 minutes and I'm hauling some of you off unless we do something. That's what should have happened. We should have got to 60 minutes and said, right, some of you aren't doing it. We're going to change it. We're going to add a little bit more intensity. El Neni, bring him off. Bring Partey on because he's a little bit more progressive. You look at someone like Pepe and say he's been in form, doing very well. So that's what should have happened a little bit earlier. I mean, some of the stats as well. This was a poor Fulham team. Like, I'll read you some of the stats. We had 70% possession against Fulham. They had one shot on target, which was their goal. We've had 18 shots in total. We weren't great. Let's acknowledge that. But let's be honest. I think that even though VAR went against us, even though it felt like a bit of a champ man game, as I said earlier, we still should have been putting those away. I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head, Pepe, how about his header, which I thought was a decent header, and the goalkeeper's made a really, really good save. You've got Martinelli, who made a good save in the first half. Yeah, go on, mate.
On that one, Chris, I've seen few people giving Pepe a bit of stick for that header, and I totally disagree with it. As you said, I thought it was a good header, and 9 times out of 10 it goes in. I think you've got to give the goalkeeper a bit of credit there. It was a great save.
Yeah, there's so much. It was just. The Fulham had a lot of luck today. I think they had luck on the penalty. They had luck on VAR. I think, like, they've talked about instinctive good goalkeeping save, but yeah, you know, he just flicks his leg out, and on another day it's an inch or two higher and it just flicks in. Saka hit the crossbar stroke post, didn't he? So, you know, there's another day we would have absolutely battered them there. But Paul, did you want to just jump in on your thoughts from the substitution side?
Yeah, once again, I agree with you both. I think it was too little, too late, you know, and I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed with the, you know, even with the substitutions with Partey and Pepe coming on. I still felt like the lack of urgency, even after the substitutions, when we knew we had to, you know, we were chasing this game. It didn't look like we had the urgency to score one goal, let alone two. You know, even, you know, like the amount of back passing and the amount of just, there was a lack of movement up front. There were a lot of things that just made me think, you know, like, what, these guys are being paid a huge amount of money to represent this team, you know? It's their job. Imagine if I just arrived at work and just didn't answer the phone and maybe just, you know, forgot to get out of my car and stayed in the garage and listened to, like, the radio, you know, instead of doing whatever it is I'm paid to be doing. It felt like that today. It's like, I don't get it. The inconsistency that this team displays is probably the most frustrating part, because you have a team that played well against Sheffield, played well against Prague, and came today and just looked like they all had malaria, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't get it, you know?
Well, I mean, we've got some worrying now, haven't we, to do, because I don't know how long Aubameyang is going to be out with malaria, but Lacazette was holding his calf there, so that looked like a bit of a strain, which, yeah, I mean, you just have to pray that Lacazette's not going to be out for too long. We play Everton next Friday. again, I'm not that fussed about the league now. I just want this season to be done from a league perspective. But the following Thursday, we play Villarreal in the first game, which is in Spain. So we've got to hope that he makes it there. But Charlie, I just wanted to ask you something. As a fellow, so me and Lee, obviously season ticket holders, and we go along to the games. Do you think, because I feel like the poor home form this season, I do feel like people talk about Arsenal being a quiet place and stuff like that, but we, as fans in the ground, a game like today, we're making noises and we're urging the team on, aren't we? And they're not going to be doing, walking pace football at the back if it's filled with 60,000 people, don't you think?
I totally agree with it. I think there's a lot of teams out there. We do get a lot of stick with the fans at the Emirates, we do, but I mean, I think the Arsenal fans are generally quite, as you said, with the walking pace, they do get on their backs a bit, which lifts them a tiny bit. Whether it's not maybe productive actually cheering the team, but I think it does lift the players. How many games have we been down, like 1-0 down against shit teams? In the last 10 minutes, all the fans get a bit restless and we raise our game, don't we, last 10, 15 minutes, which didn't happen today. And I think we are one of the teams that are struggling with not having the fans in there. I think Liverpool, I think we are, but there's other teams like West Ham who are probably benefiting it not having their fans. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of a strange one. I do think that today, with the sun out, you could imagine today would be the first game there that everyone would have had their shorts on, their t-shirts. Do you know what I mean? And it'd be a sea of red and white there. Everyone would have been up there early having a load of beers in the sun. It'd have been a good atmosphere in there today. Do you know what I mean? It would have been a nice. Everyone would have been a bit of a feel-good factor after Thursday night. So it would have been a good atmosphere. So I do tend to agree with that a bit. I think we are lacking that, but I think there'd be a case for every team to say that, though. Do you know what I mean? So
I certainly think in terms of the home form, so our away form hasn't been amazing for years now and patchy, which is fine. But home form generally for the bigger clubs, they were showing stats that we hadn't been this bad this season since like the 20s or something. So, we're talking about 100 years ago when we were this bad at home. I feel like you've got 60,000 people, even if we are a bit grumbly as a bunch in the stadium sometimes, I feel like it does make a difference for some of those home games. And we would have, and we do tend to like drive the team on. Well, at least we instill a little bit more urgency from the walking football. But Paul, I want to talk about something that Guna the Duck has just said on Facebook. Isn't it down to the manager to motivate the players and instill that sense of urgency? How much of this today do you put on Arteta?
Chris, I mean, I think Arteta's the right guy for the job. I mean, there's plenty of examples that people can throw in my face and say you're fucking mental, and maybe I am, but I think in some ways Arteta. I mean, I've seen him when he's animated. I've seen him when he seems to go over the top and trying to, control the players' every movement and every touch and everything. And then I've seen him on days like today where he probably feels like you and I do. It's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, did somebody forget to change the batteries? Or, like, what is it? These guys, they can't have been doing that in training. I mean, how did they arrive on the field and just become so shit? I'm sure he's wondering the same thing. And yes, maybe he could giddy them up, but I mean, does that work? He gets flack when he does that too much. He gets flack when he does that too little. I think it's a tough job, and I think the pandemic, going back to what you said a little bit earlier about, we haven't been this shit for 100 years. I mean, all the teams, this season have been. I mean, Liverpool lost 7 games in a row or something at home. They lost 7-2, to Aston Villa at home. Teams have basically struggled, and I think it's just down to the fact that these are really trying circumstances. They're trying times. People's away form is better than their home form. I think that says a lot. I just think it's a really, really tough time to be watching football, supporting football, playing football, and managing footballers. I just can't wait for normality to resume. I think then we get a better idea of.
Yeah, here, mate, here. And Charlie, just as we start to wrap up this podcast today, you obviously mentioned earlier about Arteta could be in trouble if we don't win the Europa League or get to the final of the Europa League and we finish 10th. And we've lamented his substitutions as well. Can you just give me your general thoughts? Just how much do you think this is on Arteta today, this result and the performance, actually, more than the result?
I think the result
Yeah.
fully on Arteta today. I do. I mean, I am fully behind Arteta as well. I mean, I like him. I like what he's trying to do. I understand the challenges he has at the club with the people, like some getting out some of the players we want to do, which was a hard challenge, getting rid of Ozil, getting rid of Lasnats, Mustafi, them people. It was tough and it was very draining on the team in the start of the season. But I just know what the Arsenal fan base are like. There's already people that don't like him. There's already people now turning on him. And I think he is quite fortunate at the minute with his home form that there is no fans in the stadium, because it would be even more toxic in there if the results were the same. But I think he's just playing a very dangerous game at the moment. I mean, there's a couple of things that really annoyed me he's done. And I was infuriated with the way the team he put out against Southampton in the FA Cup, because I think last season was something that bought him a bit of time and give people a bit of backing for him, because we won the FA Cup, which we know is difficult to win a trophy as a manager. Look at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, look at Pochettino when he was here. These managers are good managers and they've not won nothing. He come in first season, he's won a trophy. That's because he took the FA Cup seriously and because he knows what it means to Arsenal Football Club. And the day when we had that game against Southampton, he started that team, and I see the likes of El Nene in there again and other people that don't really get a look in. I was infuriated, and it cost us. And I thought, why has he done that? And I think he opens himself up for attack for that. And then things like today, once again, it opens himself up for abuse. And don't get me wrong, if we go and win the Europa League in May, fucking what a good season. We've hit our target. I know that's stupid, but it is. We go and win the Europa League. Our target at the start of every season is to try and get to the Champions League. If we go and win that, fantastic. Do you know what I mean? You can't really argue with it. He buys in time. We've got our eventual goal. But if all of a sudden we don't and we finish 10th, we go into that next season, there's so much pressure on him. I don't think he will go. I don't think the board will get rid of him. I really don't. But if all of a sudden we go and start the season next season losing 2 out of 6 or 2 out of 3, he is going to, with the fans back, there is going to be some serious hostility in that football stadium.
Yeah, certainly. And I tell you what, when you look at how the FA Cup has panned out, Southampton play Leicester as we're sort of talking today.
Yeah.
We obviously know the result. If you're listening to this tomorrow, you will know the result. But if you look at the run that Southampton have got to the semi-final, they beat us, then they played Wolves. That's the sort of game that you'd expect Arsenal to be able to win in the Cup. They then played Bournemouth. We could beat Bournemouth, no problems there. Then they've got Leicester. We beat Leicester 3-1. What was that? 6 weeks ago. We could be exactly. We could, if he'd have beaten Southampton, Arteta could be looking at, well, look, we've got 2 options here. We've got the Europa League or we've got the FA Cup as cherries on the cake of the season. But and when you think about it, Charlie, he prioritised the league and we beat Southampton. Happy days. However, what is the league to us now? It's not really a lot. So, Paul, just as we're wrapping up today, is there any sort of final thoughts you wanna touch on before we say goodbye for this particular podcast?
Yeah, it's interesting that that Arteta seems to have thrown the FA Cup. Like Charlie said, that selection was just shocking. And I've seen a lot of things on Twitter, and it's up here on the screen right now, people saying that Arteta's basically a cup manager and he's put all of his eggs in the basket of the Europa League. Well, I sure as hell hope that pays off. I hope that he ends up being a cup manager. I hope he can pull one over Unai Emery and get us into the final and then see what happens. I'm not sure who we'll be facing, whether it be United or Roma. I'm not sure who I'd prefer. Who would you prefer to be playing if we got through to the final?
I think Roma every day of the week for me.
Yeah, me too.
Man United the cup final would scare me, just because how much stake it is and our record against English clubs in Europe.
It's terrible. Yeah, it really is terrible, actually. Yeah.
So that's my only point. Is I hope that. Because let's face it, we're kind of like goldfish in a bowl. Our football fans, we kind of just remember what happened like 2 seconds ago, mostly. And if we can win the Europa League, touch wood, and get into the Champions League, then I'm sure all will be forgiven, and next season will be a clean slate. But that's a massive fucking if. It's almost too much. It's almost too much to hope for. But we kind of we end up with only that choice in front of us. So
Yeah.
Paul, I know you say like we are fickle football fans. Remember, and as I said, this is a general question for both of you. I personally think if we go and win the Europa League, the season is seen as a success. You set a target at the start of the season. Our target is to reach the Champions League. If Arteta goes and wins the Europa League and becomes the first Arsenal manager to win a European trophy since George Graham, and then gets us in the Champions League, and then financially we're in a much better position, I know it is paper over in the cracks of the shit we've had this year, but the season would be seen as a success, no?
yeah, I agree completely. And all of the trust and faith in him will, the cup will get filled up again, and he'll move into the next season with that, and
and we
and
need
we'll.
that cash injection, don't we? We need that to evolve. If we don't win the Europa League and we don't qualify Champions League at any European competition next season, where do we go from there? Really? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think it'll end up being looking at the Hale Enders. The Hale End kids are going to have to either through revenue generation through selling the likes of Nketiah, Maitland-Niles, Willock, and the likes, and then reinvesting that. I think that is essentially where we're going to go. But lads, really, really good to chat to you. We're pretty much out of time for today. Thank you very, very much for listening to us. If you've been listening to us live via Facebook or Periscope or any of the other channels that we're on, and if you listen to us as a post-match podcast the next day when you go running or when you're in the gym or anything like that, then thank you very much for joining us as well. Paul, pleasure as always.
Thanks for having us, Chris. Thanks.
And Charlie, lovely to see you.
Incognito, AFC Incognito.
Actually, Charlie. Cheers, guys. Have a lovely afternoon, whatever you do.
Whatever you're doing, have a lovely afternoon, and we will see you next time on the Gunners Town post-match Pubcast. Cheers.